Hey, trust everyone's doing well. My name is Jeff Fuller. You can find all things interviews at J Fuller Interviews on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the YouTube channel. You certainly can subscribe to the YouTube channel. There's a little greater than icon at the bottom of the screen if you're watching on YouTube, and I just certainly encourage you, hope you will subscribe so you don't miss out on this interview or the ones from the past or the ones that are coming up. Joining me now, though, is a coach at Johnson State College, Northern Vermont University, Mr. Miles Smith. Miles, good to have you on.
Glad to be here. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
So we're just going to start with the number 24. You wore that in college. Was that your high school number as well?
I actually started off with my college number. Um, in high school, I wore like multiple numbers, 15 to 23. When I started off at Mercer County Community College, I started off with 24. And that was more so basically from where I'm from in North Philadelphia. Is basically between 23rd and 24th in Berks and 23rd and 24th in Diamond as well. So basically where I grew up in North Philly, that was the representation of that number.
Good word, good word. Now you're up at Johnson State College, also Northern Vermont University. With this transition, a lot of people were curious if there'd be one team or two, and you guys have kept it at two. Has that been a benefit? How have things changed with the emergence of Northern Vermont University?
It actually has been pretty beneficial for us. We've actually had since the change, we've actually had a lot of more academic students from men's basketball that have come in the past couple of years just by changing it to university. And actually, me and the head coach over at Linden, we actually have a pretty good relationship. So it's interesting. We really don't have the same recruiting territories, so we never battle for student athletes at all. So it's something that's been it enhanced the rivalry amongst the two schools, and it also gave us an opportunity to change our brand to fit more of an academic based student athlete.
That's really good. And Miles, talk a little bit about growing up in Philadelphia, that area. Has that helped with the recruiting? I imagine so.
Yeah, for sure. Just as a player and just being a part of the community, a lot of guys that I played with, or a lot of guys that mentored me when I was younger. When I got this opportunity, they always have guys that they're still mentoring and guys that they're trying to help put into college. I always think of it as like Philadelphia is one of the best places to find basketball players from any level, Division One, two, three, junior college. So um, basically give opportunity to kids from not just Philly, but any area that has a lot of student athletes that are talented, basically giving them that opportunity to come up to Vermont, experience a different culture, a different environment, and really grow as an individual.
And now, Miles, for you, what was a selling point to get you up to Johnson State? I mean, there's a beautiful campus set in the mountains, especially in the fall. The foliage is great. And then I think, yeah, this picture here makes the student center look pretty amazing. Uh, I I don't imagine you simply came for the buildings at Johnson State. What really brought you here when you came way back when?
It's actually interesting enough. I actually didn't have Johnson on my radar at all. I was actually planning on going to either HBCU school or any local Division III schools that was in the area. And my wife was going on a college fair at Mercer County Community College, and I actually saw one of our admissions director now, Pat Rogers, at that fair, and he actually saw me and was like, "Hey, you play basketball, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." So he said that you should think about coming up to Vermont and just taking a look at us. I think you would help our institution, but I also think that you would have a great basketball career. Our basketball coach is amazing. So I thought nothing of it. And then my wife, actually told me to think about the opportunity. It's a different environment. It's completely different from the way I grew up. And I really just wanted a change of pace as well. So I went up for a visit. I met Michael Osborne, who was the coach at that time. And then I actually formed a bond with one of the basketball players that was there, Bob Shedd. one of a close friend of mine now. He actually was very welcoming when I came up there. And he, to be honest with you, he sold the school to me. He sold me having an opportunity to play with him. And if you know Bob at all, like if you're a Division III player and you get an opportunity to play with somebody like that, as a point guard, you don't want to pass up on those opportunities.
Oh, it's so funny. Bobby Shed is a great friend of mine. I remember him when he was in eighth grade, and he didn't play much in high school. And he could certainly jump, but he really developed his game in that gap year, I guess, when he spent a summer with his dad down in Pittsburgh, that area. Can you just talk when you recruit students and you see that they have potential, but they really need a year or so to develop? At your level, the Division III NCAA level, what luxury is it for you to be able to work with kids and just see them develop over that 4 year span?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, not just basketball wise, but like even from a social standpoint as well. We do a lot of things within the basketball program that we're not allowed to start doing any workouts or training until October the 15th. So what I do is that every Friday, once they enter school, we have something called team discussions. And we basically focus on social justice issues. We focus on financial stewardship. I know it sounds crazy, but we focus on our 5 pillars, which is
Yeah.
connected to the characteristics of Jesus Christ. So even though it's a secular institution, we talk a little bit about my faith in Jesus Christ a little bit, which builds that connection with the team. And once we start playing outside of practices, we do small little skill development and stuff like that. But it really allows the student to grow as an individual. And then from the basketball standpoint, you're looking at a different level where I think a lot of people look at Division III and, it's a smaller level, but it's a lot of good players at this level. So you really got different opportunities for guys that probably could have been playing Division II, but decided to come to us because they knew that they would get a lot of time, and
Yeah.
which allows the end of our bench to pretty much grow based off of competition and skill development.
And Coach Miles Smith up at Johnson State, Northern University, make some time. And I just want to share with you or ask about when you played at Johnson. Were you surprised at the level of talent at that level when you were a player at Johnson State?
Oh yeah, man. It was I mean it's crazy that I think sometimes the NAC in itself, our conference, gets a bad rap as being like one of the smaller Division III conference. But in my overall opinion, I think if guys like Bob Shedd, Charlie Viana, John Foley, if those guys grew up in where I grew up at in Philadelphia, I think they would be dynamic players where I was at. I mean, I still think to this day, I played with one of the best shooters in college, in Leandro Martinez, and one of the most versatile guys in Bob Shedd. And let it be known, I think a lot of people probably don't give him credit, but I think Charlie Buchanan was probably one of the best scorers that I've seen and defended, by playing here. So, I think the competition level, I was completely shocked about. I thought I was going to come up here and be the man, and what it turned out to be is that I came up here and I became a point guard that just ran the team because we had so many good scores
Yeah.
that was in the program. So it was definitely a shock to me, and I think it's still a shock to student athletes today as well.
Well, I think that speaks again to your maturity and your leadership. It is no surprise that you are a head coach back at Johnson. Was it interesting that you returned to Johnson? Is that something you always wanted to do? And when did you know that you were going to become a coach?
Literally had no idea that I was going to be coaching. To be honest with you, I always had confrontations with teammates and coaches. I was a very competitive person. Um, and the idea for me coaching actually came from Michael Osborne. I really looked at how he ran a program. My junior college coach is still my mentor, Kelly Williams, to this day. He had more of a relationship feel with it, and it was more of a defensive oriented. But just the way Osborne presented himself as a coach, he really put that in my head. And he was one of the people that said, like, I think that you would be a great college coach. And I thought he was just playing around, just being silly Osborne. But when we talked at the end of the year, my senior year, he said that this is something that you should really look into. So I looked at trying to play professionally a little bit, and after that, my coach left Mercer County Community College, and a coach by the name of Howard Levy, who is the head coach at Mercer now, who played at Princeton University for Coach Carell. He actually brought me on as an assistant, and literally since I've been coaching, the only thing that I've been running is whatever he learned at Princeton under Pete Carell. So I basically got put into the situation, gaining a lot of knowledge from a lot of guys from the Division I level on how to run a offensive system with kids that are not at the Division I level. And to be honest with you, I think it's just a blessing that I was given this opportunity. I literally only coached 4 years before I got my first head coaching job. And me being back at Johnson, I've always wanted to be back here. It's an interesting story. I applied for I applied for an grad assistant job to be an assistant coach under Mike Osborne, and then I applied for another a job at Johnson just to come back to the area.
Yeah.
And I didn't get the job. But our athletic director now, Jamie Ventura, like I actually reached out to him afterwards, and I was like, "Why? Like, tell me what I need to do better." So from that time on, he's actually helped me and been like a mentor for me on learning how to get jobs. So he helped me get my first head coaching job. And then when I got the job at Johnson, he's been mentoring me on how to be an administrator and also how to be a coach as well.
Well, that's great. And it really shows. And I think with coaches, we want players that are coachable or teachable.
Mhm.
And where did you learn the aspect of really try to crave knowledge, learn wisdom, learn from others? I mean, you mentioned that you kind of butted heads with some coaches or teammates, but when did that maturity really come into place that you knew you needed other people and you needed to accept that accountability and just to grow in that wisdom?
I think it came probably it's a crazy story. I think every time I talk, it always winds up leading into bringing in the gospel. But I think it was the first time that when I became a believer, 2010, and when that happened, I started looking at my life a little bit differently. And rather than me trying to be like selfish and have these selfish ambitions, I started to change my mindset on how to serve others, and what would be the opportunity for me to serve others. And the best thing I thought for me to serve others was to go into the coaching world and basically teach kids not only basketball, but like how can I teach them to do better than what I did, and be a better role model for them, and use that competitive nature to transform that into serving others and being a better teammate. And really, it just was wisdom from all of my coaches that just continuously just give me wisdom to this day on how to do that.
Yeah, it's real good. So Ozzy, he's not a lot older than you. Was that weird having someone so close in age being your coach? And did you ever challenge him to a 3-point shootout? What was that relationship like when you were a player at Johnson and having Mike Osborne as a coach?
It was an interesting relationship. We we actually, like I said, we butted heads at times on the basketball court. We butted heads at practice sometimes. Um, but the one thing about Oz, I always knew he cared. From the first time we started talking, I always knew he cared about my future. I always knew he cared about me. I always knew he wanted me to be a better teammate in order to lead our guys. And I mean, he was a very loyal dude. There would be games where I would have 3 assists and like 5 turnovers, and he would still stick with me. And he would say, like, listen, I brought you in here to be, this guard. This is my senior year. I can never forget. I'm not giving up on you. So like that meant a lot to me as a player as well. And that was it wasn't really that tough, but I will say that we did butt heads, but our relationship was definitely a positive one.
And so, a question for you: being a senior, and when you did have a rough game or whatever, and having a coach that believed in you really helped. But did you feel like you had to look over your shoulder at younger players coming up, or when you were a freshman and sophomore, were you trying to knock off the upperclassmen to find that spot and get more playing time?
It's tough because like when I was a freshman and sophomore, I always played. So I was either the starter or the sixth or seventh man, and I never really was a scorer. It was just more so defensive abilities and just to be able to like the glue guy for the team.
Yeah.
So when I was at junior college, my freshman and sophomore year, it was a JUCO, so majority of the guys were freshmen and sophomore. So
Right.
it wasn't really like a upper class, lower class thing. And we were really successful. My first year we were ranked fifth in the nation. My second year we were ranked ninth in the nation. And then I trained like when I came to Johnson, I came in as a leader already.
Mm.
Like I came in with that with like a winning mentality already. So I actually just thought of myself as a leader from the beginning, and I wanted to make sure I shaped my personality to make sure it was connected with the team. And as a junior coming into Johnson, there was a lot of Chris Lamica was there, Charlie Vienna was there,
Yeah.
Mike Bosch was there, Bob Shedd, and those guys were competitive. So I had to make sure I was just as competitive as those guys. My first year at Johnson, I was the sixth man, and I was the backup guard to Chris Lamica. And to this day, like I always wanted to compete against him. I mean, fierce. I mean, we had some
Yeah.
intense practices. But at the end of the day, like I knew what I brought to the table, and I knew what he brought to the table, and we were two different type of players, and we won a lot of games with our playing style. And then my senior year, I was more of a leader. The lower classmen, the freshmen and sophomore, they actually looked up to us. So it
Yeah.
was never like a competition. They actually really wanted to learn from us. I mean, we had a really dynamic group my senior year. I think our starting lineup was 6'3", 6'4", 6'4", 6'5", and then it was like we had a 5'10" Leandro that could shoot the ball. So
Yeah.
it was never like it was always a leadership role that I had all 4 years of college.
So, Miles, it's pretty fun for me to hear you talk about your teammates because a couple of those guys I just got to watch grow up, Mike Bosch
Mhm.
and Bob Shedd,
Yeah.
especially. But Leandro, I remember showing up at the Shape facility and just shooting around and trying to play with you guys. And it was just fun to see that chemistry that you guys had, specifically as
Mhm.
teammates. Now, as a head coach, how do you try to foster that brotherhood of
Mhm.
your players so they will have memories that will last for the rest of their lives and not look back and say, man, I really hated that player, but they could say, no,
Mhm.
we competed, but he's still my
Mhm.
brother.
I actually talk about all the experiences that I had as a player at Johnson to my guys to help them to realize like you can be better and do a lot more things than what I did as a player. I sometimes have like Bob Shedd talk to my guys. Chuck Harper was a former player. He talks to my guys a lot as well. John Foley talks to my guys a lot. I mean, if Chris Lamlick and Charlie Vienna was not in California, I
Yeah.
would probably have them talking to my guys a lot as well. But Rob Key, another guy that talks to my guys a lot.
Yeah.
Like I try to have a lot of my former players and friends and teammates talk to a couple of the guys. In fact, Bobby Shedd's brother, Zach Shedd plays
Yeah.
for me. So what we try to do is put the team in a position to focus on. For me, is the five pillars: servanthood, humility, family, passion, and thankfulness. And by focusing on those five pillars, it brings us to discussion every day. How do we compete within those five pillars? Like, how do we get better within those five pillars? And I think it helps out our team camaraderie a lot.
I think that's really good. And you mentioned a couple guys, and I keep going back. Bob Shedd is one of my favorites, and I'm going to connect him with this YouTube link and all of that. But getting serious for a moment, I mean, Bobby's not a black man, but you
Mhm,
talk about him being a great friend, about him
mhm,
helping you come to Johnson. Vermont is not a diverse, minority filled state, but you talk about
mhm.
it with great fondness that you found a place where you wanted to return to. How can we as a nation, as society, in the current climate of injustice, really be there for each other and not really care about the color of someone's skin, but we care about their heart, their soul, their background, and then we can truly become friends? How do you navigate that as a coach, that conversation with staff, but how do you live that out as well?
Um, I think part of it comes through my faith, um, uh, my faith in Jesus Christ. I think first part of that comes everything that's on in the world is a product of sin.
Mm,
I firmly believe that because of the fall, consequences is sin that happens, even within systematic racism, within our society today. And for me, rather than combating that, I try to do my best and focus on seeing how we can come together in a positive view. So what I do is I actually recruit kids from inner cities to come to Johnson because it's a different culture and different environment. But it also helps to relate to um, corporate America as well.
yeah.
Majority of the students that I have come from predominantly American and African American backgrounds. You in an environment that's predominantly white, you teach them different languages, and then hopefully that it helps them engage into two different forms of an environment, which forms two different subcultures. Um, Successful for me, at up here. Uh, we have a 100% graduation rate of you state, and every student that I have of color actually they're either working right. So my biggest thing is trying to figure out how I can be mentors to both sides, and really preaching that and having that come through. Noticing that it's sin in the world, it's racism in the world. I don't think that that is going to change. I think the best thing to do is put a positive on how we can come together. And the only thing that I can focus on is continuously living my life through the gospel, and really focusing on how can I make change.
And we just lost Coach Miles right there, unfortunately, but I think he's coming back on.
I hate you, you hate me thing.
And Miles, thank you so much for sharing that and making the time and just setting the example. I just think it's a great opportunity we have as Vermonters to embrace others into our culture, but learn from them as well. And I think what you're trying to do up there at Johnson is terrific. The 5 pillars, I got to write that down. We got to share that and got to live that most of all. But Miles, thanks so much for making the time today.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
And again, Coach Miles Smith at Johnson State, Northern Vermont University. He is a Badger, and now he's coaching the Badgers. If you can, Division III basketball in Vermont, it's a great opportunity for you to go as a family. Most of the time, it is free admission, so you can get up and see a game, cheer on some players, and be a part of really enforcing what Vermont is all about, and that's community, that's independent, but knowing that we need to learn from each other, which makes us all a lot stronger. Hey, thanks so much for joining. We have some other great interviews coming up. You certainly can subscribe on YouTube, the Jay Fuller interviews. There's a little icon on the bottom corner. It's a greater than sign. Just click on that and subscribe. Jay Fuller interviews on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon. Coach Miles Smith at Johnson State. Thanks again.